There's many decks that are just good for one meta, one set, and they become irrelevant. However, some decks stand the test of time, and today we're going to be looking at one of those decks. So, if you've been playing the Pokemon trading card game for a while, you'll know that there used to be a deck called Lost Box, and Lost Box revolved around the Lost Engine, having cards like Comfey, Colress, and Mirage Gate. That's basically how that deck functioned. You had a draw engine, you had an energy engine, and well, it was consistent. And the best part about that, it was super flexible. You could put many different Pokemon in that deck, and it would function. Like, here's a few of the Lost Box lists, and you can see they vary a lot. It was not just one deck that was, set. It wasn't a solved deck, unlike something maybe like Gardevoir or Dragapult. Nowadays, you'll see those decks, and they'll look very similar to each other event after event after event. Even after new sets, the decks barely change. However, in the current format, I think there is one deck that kind of reminds me of Lost Box. And I love Lost Box. It's my favorite deck of all time, my favorite engine of all time. And today we're going to be looking at something that reminds me of Lost Box. So you guys all know that I have played a lot of Tera Box in my time. I'm still the only person in the Western world to get to a finals of a major event with Tera Box itself. Obviously, it was a bit of a Mickey because it was in South Africa, so not as big as elsewhere around the world, but I'll take it. For now, I'll take it, Can take the credit where it's at. Anyway, so today we're going to be looking at Lost Box, and I'm going to be talking about what the deck's identity is right now, going into the next format, and what I think about the deck. Take a few look at some of the lists, and also what I think could be improved or be changed, or if it's just perfect right now, if it's perfect the way it is. So this is the core cards, right? So unfortunately, we don't really see any of the new cards that I think are really good in the core cards. But that's because the core cards of this deck are very difficult to actually figure out, right? There are obviously some easier ones, such as the Fan Rotom. We always play 2 Fan Rotom. We always play 4 Noctowl. The Hoothoots, it says only 2, but that's because sometimes you're playing the 80 HP Hoothoot over the 70 HP Hoothoot because of things like Monkey Dory and Phantom Dive. That can kind of hurt you. And usually we are now obviously playing the Teal Mask. I mean, not the Teal Mask, sorry, the Wellspring Ogerpon and also the Teal Mask Ogerpon. Both of these, even though they sound very similar, they have very different roles. If you think about it, this is kind of our energy engine in a way. This is our pseudo Mirage Gate, because with Teal Dance, you can take a grass energy and attach it to that Pokemon as an ability, which means you still have your energy attachment, and then you'll use one of your energy switches to switch it from your Teal Mask Ogerpon onto something like your Pikachu, and then you'll use your actual Mirage Gate. Unfortunately, it is a supporter, which is Crispin. Search your deck for 2 different energy, put 1 into your hand, and 1 gets attached to your Pokemon. So definitely nowhere near as good as a Mirage Gate. Mirage Gate was an item, and it could take 2 different energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. So as an item, very strong. Crispin nowhere near that strength, but it is still the closest thing we have, and it is obviously really powerful, because when you pair that with something like a Sparkling Crystal, you can come out of nowhere with something, let's say, like a Pikachu EX. Obviously, Pikachu EX is a Terra Pokemon, and it has a really awkward attack cost. So it has 3 energy attack cost. The thing is, they are all different kinds of energy, right? So how do you power it up in a single turn? Well, you'll use Crispin, which then attaches one of the energy to the Pokemon. You'll take the other energy into your hand, and then you'll manually attach it, and then you'll use something like Sparkling Crystal to attach to the Pokemon, which means Terra Pokemon need 1 less energy to attack, and now you can attack straight away. Or if you don't have access to Sparkling Crystal, then you can use the Teal Dance method with the energy switch to move it onto the Pikachu, and then bam, we've got a fully powered up attacker for 3 energy. And the thing is, this is very powerful, because let's say we prize Sparkling Crystal, then you can do this for any Pokemon. It's not only Terra Pokemon that Crispin works for, right? It works for any Pokemon in the game. And what set has just released with very powerful Pokemon with sometimes questionable attack costs? Well, it's the brand new set, Mega Evolutions, right? So I'm going to show you some of the lists right now that have been popping up, and we'll take a look at what they look like. All right, so over here is the first list. Behind me is a Mew EX, so that card over there is Mew. I'll just do that. And this is the list. So this is one of the lists that I was looking at, and I think it is pretty cool. Shout out Carter. I think this is Carter's list. I hope it is correct. One sec, the light has gone. Ba-bum. So you can tell that this deck does play some of the new Pokemon. One of them being the Mega Absol EX, right? And Mega Absol has seen a really big resurgence. Well, not really a big resurgence, it just has been really good. Ever since Mega's released, no one really thought Absol was going to be one of the flagship Megas. You know, everyone was looking at things like Mega Gardevoir, Mega Lucario, like those were the decks. However, recently we have been seeing Mega Absol and Mega Kangaskhan being put in, well, the deck themselves, right? They are a really good deck right now, probably a tier 1 deck, tier 2 deck. Mega Box, right? Tord created Mega Box. However, I think this deck is honestly just as strong as Mega Box, if not better, because of the options you have. So you do still have access to things like the Claw of Darkness, which is just the main reason this card is so good. Claw of Darkness does 200 damage, meaning it one-shots things like Gardevoir. And then also, you get to discard a card from your opponent's hand, and that's really strong, especially in a format where things like Ace-Specs exist, right? People like to hold on to Ace-Specs. Like, Dragapult will hold on to an Ace-Spec, and if you're able to just snipe it out of their hand, there's a good chance they can't attack the following turn, and that's really, really strong. And then you also have the Terminal Period. You probably never use Terminal Period in this deck because you have no way of damage manipulation. So it's honestly just for the Claw of Darkness attack, which is really powerful. And then we have Mega Kangaskhan, which plays many different roles in this deck. So first of all, it has a 300 HP basic Pokemon, right? Very tanky. Another thing is that it can do 200 damage, but it can also do 50 damage if you flip heads. And if you flip another heads, it can do another 50 damage. And if you flip 10 heads in a row, well, you're going to be doing 500 more damage. So it just flips until you get tails, and then you do 50 damage for each of those heads that you flipped. So obviously, it is a get out of jail free card sometimes, where sometimes you just have nothing and you just need a swing, and rapid fire combo is one of those cards where it can just pay off, right? But that is not the best part of the card. But the best part of the card is the run errand ability. So once during your turn, if it is in your active position, you can draw 2 cards. And this is, this is comfy. This is flower selecting, except you don't have to flower select, and you just take 2 cards straight into your hand. So it is a very good consistency boost, and that is something that Tera Box has struggled with in the past. After you get Iono'd, then it's sometimes quite difficult to recover. But now when you have Mew EX, Fezandipity, Kangaskhan in play, if you have Kangaskhan inactive, right, you have Mew EX on bench and Fez on bench, let's say you get Iono to 1 card, right? You draw for turn, that's 2 cards, you have 2 cards in hand. You can restart for the 3rd card, so now you have 3 cards in hand. You can use Flip the Script for another 3 cards, so you have 6 cards in hand. And then you can use Run Errand for another 2 cards, which means you have 8 cards in hand, right? So, very powerful draw engine. And that's not even speaking about Noctowl, right? Noctowl Jewel Seeker, very powerful as well. When you evolve it from your hand, and if you have a Terra in play, search your deck for 2 trainer cards, right? And obviously trainer cards are just the best cards in the game. You can get basically anything that is over here, and that means almost every single card in your deck is accessible, because Earthen Vessel means you can get all of these cards, right? All of your energy cards, and then things like Nest Ball and Ultra Ball means you can get all of your Pokemon. So actually, with a single Noctowl, you have access to literally your entire deck. Everything is accessible. So it is a very, very powerful engine, and it all ties in together very well. However, let's first take a look at the deck list. So this is Carter's deck list, and I really like this one because we've already gone over Absol, which goes through the Guardy matchup. We've got Mega Kangaskhan, which helps with the draw engine and also just some decent attack, right? And then we've got Hooper EX. Hooper EX is another decent tech card because you're already using Dark Energy for the Absol, right? So you may as well play the Hooper, because Hooper not only punishes opponents for having lots of energy in play, it also one-shots opposing Kangaskhan's. And this is something this deck can struggle with, because your highest damage output right now is Pika, right? Pika can hit 300, and it's a stable 300, like it's consistent damage, there's no drawback, you have to discard your energy, but usually your Pika's going to go down in the following turn, and usually it's difficult to chain Pikas, is what I'm saying. However, the Pika is you get their energy and bam, you're doing 300 damage. You can do that with Mega Kangaskhan, you have to flip 2 heads. You can do that with Pekron, they have to take 5 prize cards. So this is your only real consistent way to deal 300 damage. And obviously, Mega Kangaskhan has 300 damage. But what happens if you increase that number? What happens if you put something like a Lively Stadium in play, which gives all basic Pokemon plus 30 HP? Well, now Pikachu's not one-shotting that. What happens if you put a Bravery Charm on Mega Kangaskhan? Right, that's another 80 HP. Now, Mega Kangaskhan, it's surviving a Pika. Another 80 HP with a Lively Stadium, but it's plus 50 for the Bravery Charm itself. But what happens if you have 2 Bouffalons in play? Well, 2 Bouffalons, say your colorless Pokemon takes 60 less damage from attacks. So, same thing, it's surviving a Pika attack. But that's where Hooper comes in and is able to just bypass all of that with Energy Crush, because if they have 3 energy attached to the Kangaskhan, you're doing 300 damage, right? For 2 energy, that's good. But if they have another energy, right, 4 energy, that means you're doing 400 damage. And that's already bypassing most of, those cards. So unless they have a combo of multiple of these kinds of cards, then it's very difficult for them to actually survive the hit. And the thing is with these Mega Kangaskhan Absol decks is that they flood energy all over the board. For the first 2 turns of the game, usually what they're going to be doing is just using TM Energize, and that's going to get energy flooded all over the board, and that's something that they can't always play around. The thing is with Tera Box is that since you have so many ways to build the deck, it's very difficult for your opponent to actually know what you are playing, because they see all these different kinds of energies, but these energies can mean so many different things, right? And on top of that, we have Lily's Clefairy, which is just still another great way to deal with the Phantom Dive, with the Dragapult. However, speaking of Phantom Dive, you can copy Phantom Dive with Mew EX, Genome Hacking, right? 3 colors energy. So, like we said, we can power it up. Any 3 energy Pokemon we can power up with a Teal Dance plus E-Switch with a Crispin on that same turn. And then we have 3 energy attached already. Bam. Double E-Switch just makes the deck really consistent in chaining these attacks, right? And then we have, obviously, the probably best card of the deck. And that is the Water Ogerpon. I feel like I've spoken about Water Ogerpon a billion times, and for good reason, right? This card is one of the best cards in the game, if not checked, right? If you don't respect Water Ogerpon, you will get punished. You will get punished. If you're not playing something like a Shaman, or something like what did they used to play? They used to play those capes, the big cape, plus 100 HP cape, I don't know what it's called, big cape. Then Wellspring Ogerpon is going to go through things like your Ralts, right? Like your Dreepy, like your Morgrem, Impidimp, right? So all of these little Pokemon are being threatened by Torrential Pump, and it's very easy to set up a Torrential Pump. It is a Terra Pokemon. What does that mean? Means with a Crystal plus 1 Crispin, right? And that's just 2 trainer cards. And how do we get 2 trainer cards? 1 Noctowl. 1 singular Noctowl, if we have Wellspring Ogerpon in play, can immediately translate into a turn 1 or turn 2 Torrential Pump, right? And since we are now upping the energies, having energy for turn on your first turn is so strong. Because now let's say we find a Wellspring Ogerpon, which is pretty easy to do because if we find Rotom, means we can find Ditto, and Ditto, transform to start, means we can usually find things like the Wellspring Ogerpon. But let's say we just have the Rotom and have an S-Ball for the Wellspring Ogerpon. Well, that next turn, we can just attach, we can attach to the Wellspring Ogerpon, and on the following turn, instead of going like Crispin plus Crystal, right? We can get Boss plus Crystal, attach again, and now we have a Boss's Orders on our second turn with a fully powered up Torrential Pump being able to target down, let's say, 2 routes. Because sometimes people will hide behind something like a Monkey Dory, right? And that's fine, but we can get around that, right? We can get around that, and obviously it just depends on how many energy you play, and if you find the energy. It's a very situational, situation. But it is definitely possible. This is one of those decks where it is very easy to kind of replicate your game plan because you have constant access to your entire deck. So it is a deck where you have to learn the matchups and have to understand the prize mapping, right? Because a lot of matchups are very, similar. Like, for example, Raging Bolt, right? It is going to be 95% of the time a 2-2-2 prize map, and it's one that you can replicate almost every single game because you will always have access to Jewel Seeker, right? You can usually just go Jewel Seeker into Clefairy, and then into something like a Pikachu, and then into something like an Ursaluna, right? So it's very easy to just get these attacks done and dusted, right? And just constantly have an idea of what is going on because you have so much control over your deck. But that is also a somewhat negative thing because sometimes people can overthink what's going on, right? Because obviously having access to your entire deck all the time can be a little bit overwhelming. So you do have to just understand what you're going for and not tunnel vision. That's something that I do as well, right? I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm saying that tunnel visioning is definitely... There's my speaker turning off. Tunnel visioning is definitely a big misplay that can happen, and you will completely zone in on having to attack with the Pika, even though all you have to do is just attach to the Fan Rotom and attack at something inactive, right? So it is very easy to just forget what's going on, and then, well, yeah. Anyway, here is another deck. This is, I don't remember whose list, sorry, but I'll probably put it up in post. This is a more, I guess, less Mega-reliant deck list, but they are still playing a Mega, which is the Mega Mawile. And I've spoken about things like the other 2 Megas, why they're so good. And now let's take a look at Mega Mawile, like why Mega Mawile is actually pretty damn good. So, Mega Mawile, Gobble Down attack. This attack does 80 damage for each prize card you have taken. So, obviously, Tera Box is a deck that sometimes can struggle with closing out games. If you're wondering what this card behind me, sorry, is, this is an Iron Leaves, okay? Iron Leaves. But this deck can struggle with closing out games. Sometimes you just run out of steam, right? You expend your knockdowns earlier on, you expend your Crispins, your crystal's gone, your energies are done, and it's a little bit difficult to close out a game with something like a big Pikachu attack. So how can we avoid this? Well, Gobble Down is a very, very strong attack because it does 8 damage to each prize card you have taken, right? If you have taken 3 prize cards, you are doing 240 damage, which is dealing with most of the 2 prizes in the game. If you take a 4th prize card, you are now dealing 320 damage. And that is the number you want to hit, right? So that means essentially what you have to do against Dragapult and Gardevoir is you have to take 4 prizes, and then you can close out the game with Mega Mawile. The problem that this deck struggles with is sometimes closing out that game into something like for example, Gardevoir. It doesn't have a great way to deal with Gardevoir, because the only way for you to kill with a Gardevoir is with a Pika plus Vitality Band, and that is just not easy to get to. Or with like a Gravity Mountain, and we don't really play Gravity Mountain anymore, right? So it is a lot easier to just have Mega Mawile, where all we need is Attach plus Crispin, right? So it is not the most difficult thing to get to, and it can just completely close out the game, and that's what it's there for, closing out games. Huge Bite is also a decent attack and sometimes can be used, for example, against something like a Goldengo. Goldengo has 260 HP, Huge Bite does 260. If your opponent's active Pokemon already has 30 damage counters on it, its base damage is 30, so that kind of is shit, but you don't really have a way. Most of the times, if you are swinging into something and not killing it on that turn, you are probably going to be losing that game, right? So Huge Bite is a decent attack. Gobble Down is the main reason it is used, because it just closes out the game. Iron Leaves is another one of those things that gets energy moved around the board as well onto itself, and then can also one-shot things like Zod, one-shot things like Grimmsnarl, and that is those 2 of those decks are pretty big in the format right now. And yeah, it's just this is, I guess, a more consistent list with a little bit less text, but it has a more difficult time into things like Gardevoir, I would say, obviously because of the lack of the Absol. And now this is the most simple list. This is a list without any megas, right? This is probably your kind of base for looking at Tera Box as a deck right now. You have things like Terapagos, which are, common attackers in these kinds of decks, but have kind of fallen off recently, right? And then we have 2 TL Mask Ogopons, which used to be the norm, however, now not so much anymore. So this is a very simple list, and it is pretty nice, right? It's fine. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just you're, sacrificing your techs for consistency, right? You're playing things like Buddy Buddy Puff and to try to play the game more and more and more. And I'm not saying it's anything wrong. I think this is the really cool thing about this deck, is that there's so many ways to build it, so many ways to play it, and there's no really correct way. And moving forward, there won't ever be a correct way. There'll probably be the best list at a time, but the meta is ever changing, and a deck that is anti-meta will also be changing with that meta, right? So if Gardevoir falls off the face of the earth, then different things will be played. If Dragapult falls off the face of the earth, then we don't have to play Leeds Clefairy, right? That's kind of just how this deck is going to work. It's going to be like a rock, paper, scissors deck. Like this beats this, this beats this, this beats this. And it's fine. It's a great deck. I think moving forward, it's going to be a great deck. And yeah, what would I say in the future? How could this deck become better? Well, I think next format with Dawn being introduced, Dawn can grab you 1 basic, 1 stage 1, and 1 stage 2. What does this mean? Well, we're not playing a stage 2, but now we can reintroduce something like a Pidgeot, right? And Pidgeot basically gets rid of this deck's main struggle of not being able to recover from an Iono, right? From a dead hand. And Pidgeot helps out a lot with that, right? Let's take this exact deck list, for example. Let's cut 1 Teal Mask Ogopon, let's cut 1 Crispin, and let's cut 1 Grass Energy, right? And we put in 1 Pidgey, 1 Pidgey or Ray Candy, and then 1 Pidgeot, right? And that means 1 Noctowl could be able to grab us something like a Dawn. We can cut something for a Dawn as well, probably the Buddy Buddy Puffin. We can cut that for a Dawn, and then we can go ahead, grab Dawn, right? Grab the Ray Candy, and then get the Pidgeot set up on the same turn. And with Dawn, we can grab a Terra Pokemon, right? We can grab a Noctowl and Pidgeot. So, completely broken card. And with that Pidgeot, we can then grab another card. And with that Noctowl, we can grab 2 more trainer cards. So, an insane consistency boost, and all you need is that 1 Noctowl in the beginning of the game to just get it all powered up, right? I feel like it's going to be so powerful to just be able to go Jewel Seeker for Dawn plus Candy, right? and then bam, we have Pidgeot set up, and we have the best engine in the game, and we have access to everything every turn, basically. We will be able to chain these attacks so much more often. Anyway, that is all from me for today. I'm going to be making more videos on Tera Box because I think the deck is really fun. I think the deck is also in a good position, and I think the deck is just going to keep getting better and better and better, because no one is respecting this deck right now. It's crazy, right? If we take a look at the Dansk Regional right now, what's doing well? Eevee Box, right? It's a very close and similar deck to this. However, I think moving forward, this deck might just be better because of the way you can kind of shape this deck. Eevee Box is a little bit more of a solved deck, whereas this deck is kind of just one of those like shitbox decks where you kind of just throw stuff in and it just works, right? Because you've got a broken engine with broken attackers. All right, peace.